Thanks so much for joining us for episode 1 of OpsOwners. Excited to have with me today Mark Beebe. Mark is the Chief Operating Officer at Enterprise Stewardship, where he leads on operational strategy, performance excellence, and brand integrity. In his work, he's focused on building accountability structures, developing leaders, and fostering a community for growth for Christian business leaders and executives. Mark, thank you for being here today.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. Tell me a bit about Enterprise Solutions Enterprise Stewardships and how you got connected there. I know we have the background at C12. So excited to hear about kind of your career journey into getting into the COO role.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned previously, with a great organization, C12, and they serve a very similar audience in terms of Christian business owners and CEOs. We broaden that a little bit at Enterprise Stewardship, where number one, we don't work in the peer advisory group space. We work with full leadership teams in implementing an operating system primarily in their business. But we're still working with for-profit, privately held, for the most part, Christian businesses, with the end goal of trying to figure out how do you create flourishing. For us, what we would define flourishing would be we are maximizing economic, social, and spiritual impact. And so most systems out there are going to focus on the economical impact. Some will dabble in the social impact, but very, very few, if any, other than ours, will focus on both economic, social, and then the spiritual impact as well.
Yeah, a very holistic approach to owning and operating a business and that impact. I saw on the website that y'all are focused on impact for like the next generation. It's not just the next quarter. It's the next generation that you're like the vision is for, and I love that. I love that about the organization.
Yeah, we're big believers in long-term impact. And so we want people thinking about the next 50, 100, 200 years, in part because a lot of times when we think about the compound interest effect, we think about money. You know, if you put $1 in today, over the next 100 years, what will that dollar turn into on a,
Yeah.
let's say, 5% compound rate? Well, we like to flip that. And while that's true, most people don't think about that from a social or spiritual standpoint as well.
Yeah.
And so right now, we're really on the front end of a great wealth transfer. And a lot of that's through business succession, business acquisition. And most of the stats you see that are out there, most Christian business owners regret the sale of their business
Really?
within the first 12 months of selling it, because not what happens economically, but because of what can happen social spiritually. The amount of businesses that truly care about the social spiritual impact while growing is still somewhat small. And when you put that much work over a 10, 20, 30, 40-year period,
Yeah.
and then you transfer it to someone and you see that go away, it's a real shame. And so we believe that not only when you transfer that company or that organization to the next generation, should the social spiritual maintain, but it can continue to compound at higher and higher rates. And that's what we've seen. You know, Enterprise Stewardship was born out of another organization called Capital 3, which was a investment banking company. And under their umbrella, they have a handful of companies. And I think it was 2018, 2019, somewhere in there is where that transfer happened from the founder to his son. And as much good work that happened in the first 30 years, over the last 5, 6 years, to see how it continues to compound socially and spiritually is incredible. And we don't believe that's an anomaly. That's very replicable if you have the right system in place to run the business. But more importantly, if you have the right leaders to transfer the business to. And so while we do focus a lot on systems, we put an equal amount of attention, effort, focus on the culture, and the leadership characteristics of who should be in charge of a business. Because if you don't have that right, you're not going to have a flourishing business. You need a flourishing leader to have a flourishing business. And a lot of times we want the business results without the character and the cultural results that we're doing internally first.
Yeah, aren't there like I believe I've heard of, and you might have the stats on this, but I've seen anecdotally a staggering amount of businesses that start with such a high push on core values and the culture, and then as soon as there's an M&A, that culture is just wiped, and it's just a completely different organization after. Um,
Yeah, there's a couple organizations out there. So from a mergers acquisitions standpoint, you can find different data out there. I can't quote the sources off the top of my head, so I'll be careful to speak too
yeah.
specifically on it. But even you got to be careful when it's not an acquisition. Peter Greer's book Mission Drift talks a lot about how through the generations, if you don't identify the right culture, the right leaders to keep those things in place,
Mhm.
how easy it is for a very well-intended culture that's trying to do things the right way, that it can still drift into losing the social spiritual side of the business.
Mm, mm, yeah. Um, I know that with the big three, you said the economic flourishing, the social, and the spiritual. Um, I know that y'all's system is called the Enterprise Stewardship System. I'd love to hear more about that and the process and procedures and everything you've developed and worked on to um, input into these businesses that you're helping.
Yeah, so if we think of the three capitals, economic, social, and spiritual, that's where we're going. That's the output. So if we engage with organizations, that's the expected outcomes that they're going to see results in all three of those areas. But that's not the process that we go through. How we do it is really through four primary disciplines of business. So if you really want a flourishing business, you need to be really clear on the purpose of your business, answering the primary question of why do we exist? What's the purpose? Or why do we have a business at all? The second discipline would be strategy, which is really defining where we're going. And we think the defining question of strategy is who are we serving? Strategy is a service question, and it's getting really, really clear about the who that we serve.
Mm,
The third discipline, which I think is probably what we'll talk most about today, is the discipline of operations.
mm,
And so the discipline of operations is answering the question, how are we serving? And so we work a lot with the principle of pursuing excellence. And that's really where I would define the purpose of operations is
mm,
to be excellent in how we're serving our ideal customer. And then the fourth discipline is one of execution. And so the execution is answering the question, what is our impact? And so again, when we get to what is our impact, a lot of times we think purely economics. And don't get me wrong, we want economic impact. Like we don't, we're not soft there. We
yeah.
want to improve top line and bottom line KPIs and revenue, profitability, all that. We just don't want to stop there. So if you look at how we identify that and what it looks like, we would say if all you have is economic impact, then you're probably exploiting people.
Mm,
If you have economic and social impact, we'd say that's respectful, but economic, social, and spiritual impact, that's where you become a blessing to
mm,
people. And so when we look at what is our impact in the execution discipline, again, we're always going to pull people back to those three. And you'll hear me do that even a lot today because it's so natural for us just to think through the economics. And again, it's important. We lead with it. If you don't have it, trying to go to social spiritual impact without first having a sustainable business model, generous with your finances, all of that, it becomes a moot point. We just can't stop there.
You said the if it was just economic, what was your
Exploitate. It leads to exploitation.
yeah. I like that. I mean, that again, going back to kind of that generational impact and looking at things with more wisdom on like, okay, like what is our goal? What is our primary purpose? Is it just money? Okay, well, this is where that road likely
That's
leads.
right.
If you add in the social aspect, the social impact, the social currency, capital, then I like that progression. I like that progression. It ties everything well together. So
Well, the other aspect of that, so those are the four disciplines. Again, it's purpose, strategy, operations, and execution. But those by themselves don't really get you anywhere. So we also talk about four drivers. And really what we do is we create this four by four
Hmm.
matrix. So the drivers are your principles, and your principles determine your people drive your practices, and your practices determine your performance. Okay. And so, as I said earlier, we focus just as much on culture as we do on the systems. When we look at culture, that's really what we're talking about are the principles and the people components. And so I mentioned, when it comes to operations, the principle that is driving us there is the pursuit of excellence.
Hmm.
And then the people component of how we live that out is really making sure we have people of competence, right? If we're going to be excellent, we got to be competent. And so that's where we look at. But we define all of those through each of those disciplines to make sure culturally we're starting principles first. And if we know the principles that we need to embody, then we can better identify the right people. And we know we can have the best system in the world, but if you got the wrong people on board, it's just they're not going to be able to live it out. They're not going to give it life, and they're not going to get the performance that we want out of it.
Yeah, I love how organized y'all are in thinking about the disciplines versus the drivers, and I love how yeah, again, organizational thinking and strategy there. Really appreciate that and respect that. Um, so okay, yeah, let's talk a bit about operations. You said operational excellence is the goal, the aim. Um, I'd love to hear some of those specific tactics that you've worked on within developing those systems or training the people for operational excellence.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk a lot about the intricacies of all that. First, again, if we just start culturally, to be excellent, there's three virtues that we talk about, and that is expertise, innovation, and discipline. So, if we're going to pursue excellence, we have to become experts in what we're doing. We have to be innovative. We know the world, the business world today is changing at a crazy pace, and so you got to develop your innovation along the way. And then you got to be disciplined. And unfortunately, discipline is really difficult, and most of us don't like it, right? I mean, if you just think, hey, we want a highly disciplined person, I mean, what comes to mind? Maybe a military background, or just hard nose, or maybe someone who says, man, I don't even know if I love working for disciplined people because they're on it all the time. And so we don't mean discipline in a bad way. There really, if you think about discipline, there's two forms of discipline. There's the noun and the verb. I can be a person of discipline, which is good. That's what we strive for. That's on the cultural side. That's what
Uh-huh.
we're trying to produce. And unfortunately, if we aren't people of discipline, then we get disciplined. The
Yeah.
the verb form of that, right? And so it's just the reality. But I think really when you think about excellence, it's starting there. Are we the right kind of people? Now, from an organizational side, how do you do that? Real practically, we break the business down into five what we call critical success factors. So we talk about navigation, which is really your leadership, how you're steering the ship of the organization. Um, you have culture, which culture we're talking about everything people. So this is professional development. This is how you're building into people socially and spiritually.
Hmm.
Everything that we're doing to promote our people. You have customers, which is really about how we make money, how you gain customers, how you keep customers.
Right.
You have product, or this is more your true operational category, and then cash. And so, or financial management, or everything you do with how you're running the business, seeing the money in your business. And so,
Right.
we start with those five critical factors. Obviously every business is going to have some nuances with that, right? We've worked with organizations from a ton of different industries, and so you talk about a SaaS model organization versus heavy manufacturing. When you talk about product, it's gonna get pretty different. And so we'll help identify kind of those detailed sub factors within the organization. But we start there. And then one of the biggest gaps, it seems so simple, but if you just ask people who's responsible for what and what are the 3 to 5 most important parts of their role, or what are the 3 to 5 most important things that they do in their role, um, they can kind of get there, but there's usually not the clarity that you would expect there to be, even at the executive level.
Uh,
And then if you start asking the entire leadership team, hey, what are the 3 most important things that Cannon does in his role? It's
mhm.
amazing the disparity that you may
Uh,
see in those
mhm.
responses.
Yeah.
And so we do a lot of work right up front to define what we call the roles, responsibilities, and expectations.
Mm.
And so if you know under those 5 critical factors, who's responsible for what, um, what's each role, and then what are the expectations? Are they clearly defined of what success looks like? Then you're in a much better starting spot. Um, you can evaluate success or failure from there. You can much more easily understand, is someone in the right seat? You can better identify, is this a skill issue or a will issue? It makes performance management way easier because everything's clearly defined. You know what the objectives are, the expectations,
Mhm.
and uh, whoever's leading in that area, they know what's exactly expected of them. We've done some previous research in 22, 23, actually as part of my work with C12, that showed one of the gaps that a lot of executive leaders have from their CEOs or owners is just not having clear expectations or timely feedback
Uh,
within their role. And you would think, well, this is crazy. They're a key leader. How do they not have clear expectations? Well, for a lot of owners or CEOs, we found this mindset of, well, I hired Cannon as an executive leader. I'm paying him good money. I expect him to know what to do. I'm bringing you in for your expertise. Okay, great. So we need expertise to pursue excellence, right? We,
right.
we know we need that. But without the clarity behind it, it gets really wonky really fast. And everyone's pursuing different things. And so operationally, while we all are pursuing excellence, we don't have the right clarity or accountability along the way to make sure that we're driving to the right outcomes.
Got it. Okay, so one of you said one of the first things that you do when you're implementing is like just getting clarity on those roles, responsibilities, and expectations. And so, what like after the time where that is clearly defined, people are comfortable with understanding and like on the same page about those expectations and who owns what. What would you say is the next step for that organization, like to uh, for that flourishing that we talked about earlier?
Yeah, so as we define who's responsible for what, we'll take a first stab at the next 90 days. So,
Okay.
okay, over the next 90 days, what are we going to try to get done in this time period?
Okay.
Um, and as you do that, we start to create that 90-day objectives. We'll start by we assess everything. Okay, red, yellow, green. And so we'll create the general list, and then we work with organizations to create their sub factors that are very relevant to their organization and their industry. And then we start saying, okay, today, if we know what success looks like, or we know what the outcome we want in this, are we red, yellow, or green?
Hmm.
Okay, very simple. This isn't exercise to get anyone in trouble. Um, I get more weirded out when I see greens across the board
Huh.
than if I see reds across the board. When I see everyone saying we're green, 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 it's probably there's probably some trust issues, or we're not sure
Okay.
whether they trust us or they trust their boss, or maybe hiding some things. Now there are some organizations that are truly green in a lot of areas, but if they're engaging with us, we like to work with good organizations that are trying to become great. We typically don't do turnarounds or things like that, but But even there's quite a bit of yellow or red because they're looking at continuous improvement. And so we want to get here. Um, anyway, so first we start with the assessment
But
of red.
you're involving the entire, like, the majority of the organization in that audit.
The leadership team.
Okay,
We
okay,
work
just making sure. Okay,
primarily with the executive leadership team.
okay,
Yep. So typically, anywhere between three to six people
yeah,
are on board with us,
okay,
um, and they'll assess in their area of given leadership.
uh-huh.
But once you know red, yellow, and green, and again, typically there's the strategy component, right? So assuming you have a strategy, whether it's excellent or not yet, you have a strategy, meaning you have a direction that you're going and some goals that are probably 3 to 5 years out. And so you assess on operationally, how are we doing on our way to get there? You may have a list of 50, 75, 100 things of sub factors within those five primary categories. And so then you got to decide what's the most important thing for us to improve on to turn from red to yellow or yellow to green, or if something's green, maybe we want to just capitalize on it, and that becomes a key objective for us. That's fine too. But if you can do that and stay, this is where the discipline comes back, and stay disciplined to review those on a quarterly basis. Say, okay, Canon, you're over customers, so it's your turn to report out. Are we red, yellow, green on all these areas that we said we wanted to move the needle on? Did we move the needle? And if we didn't move the needle anywhere, we're going to look and say, okay, did you complete the objectives that we set out over the next 90 days? Yes or no? Sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's no. If it's no across the board, that usually becomes an issue that, great, we've now identified it. And we got to figure out, is this a skill issue? Is it a will issue?
Yeah.
Do you not know how to do it? Did we hire the wrong person? Were there other factors in play?
And
But it
then do
becomes,
you, so okay, so you kind of work your way backwards. You look
yeah,
at where are we at, red, yellow, green, if, and then you could backtrack to, okay, did you complete those 90-day, what did you call them, the priorities, the quarterly
objectives
priorities?
and key results. Yeah,
Okay.
OKRs.
Okay. And then I would assume you can backtrack further into, did you complete your, like, where are you at with your expectations, your KPIs, your scorecard, if you're EOS familiar, like you can
Mhm.
keep working your way backwards to kind of follow,
That's
like,
right.
okay, where did things fall apart?
Yeah, because again, if you have 75 sub factors within the organization, you are not working on all 75 sub factors over the next 90 days.
Right.
At least not at the level where we're going to track for improvement at the leadership team level. And so what we're doing is we're picking out what are the most important ones, given our existing time, talent, and treasure. What's the most important things we can work on that will maximize our economic, social, and spiritual capital within the organization? That's the question we're asking. So out of that, you probably have 3 or 4 things that you're really working on over the next 90 days. And those are the things that we're going to push on the most. Assuming we do that well and we move the needle, then at the next 90-day mark, we're asking the same question. Okay, let's review our red, yellow, green list.
Uh-huh.
Do we keep moving on these 3 or 4 things? Or do we need to create a different set of OKRs over the next 90 days that make sure we're working on the right things? But when you do that, there's no real hiding around who's doing what or what's the most important things, because as a leadership team, you've already decided that. So if you have, let's say, 3 objectives that you're working on over the next 90 days, and at the end of the 90, you say, well, I actually didn't do any of those, but here's what I did get done. Then the question becomes, why did that not come up earlier? As a leadership team, why, we decided these were the 3 things that were going to be the most important for us to hit our strategic objectives. And so it really, there's nowhere to hide. Like, it's just much more transparent and people can be accountable to what they said they were going to do.
Okay. Do you run into um, issues with the leadership team in the middle of a quarter, that 90-day sprint, putting in new objectives of like, okay, we're going to divert our attention in the middle of this 90 days, we're going to divert our attention over here. Have you run into issues where leadership team is having trouble staying focused on this is our agreed upon objective for the quarter, but we're going to go over here?
Sure. Yeah. So that speaks to the importance of weekly leadership meetings to make sure that you're tracking on these every single week. And so there's really, again, there's no surprises. And so if every week you're touching base and saying, how are we towards these objectives? Then that helps your ability to stay true. But we all deal in the whirlwind. I mean, every single day, and depending on the industry, it looks different, but there's stuff that pops up every day that fights for our attention and focus,
Uh-huh.
right? And so I may say I'm super focused on these three things, and then tomorrow hits and someone quits, or there's an issue on the manufacturing floor, or someone's been sick for a long time and we lost some productivity, or you know what I mean? Like things happen all the time that still demand our time and attention. And so I think the more you do it and the more you stay disciplined on the most important things, every 90 days gets a little bit easier. And that's where a system and some coaching comes into play to make sure that you're talking through how do you stay focused amidst the whirlwind.
Uh-huh.
But it's not easy, it's not perfect, and there will be things that demand our attention. And there are some legitimate times where we need to change a 90-day
Yeah.
objective or key result.
Yeah.
The key in my mind would be if it's happening all the time, then we're probably not picking the right key results up front, or we're not disciplined as a group to stay focused on what we need to be.
Mm.
So that's where the coaching would come into play to figure out, okay, why are we constantly switching? Is it because we don't think we can do it? Is it because we're
Mhm.
not focused? Are there other issues that are more important for us? Do we need to get better at choosing our key results?
Mm.
And we can figure that out. But as long as people are committed to the process, then over time it gets easier and easier.
Are there any other common pitfalls you've seen for these executives other than like distraction, um, shiny object syndrome, or like any other common pitfalls in the
Yeah.
exec team?
Time and commitment. I mentioned earlier, so it's expertise, innovation, and discipline.
Hmm.
Typically, when you're hiring an executive leader, the expertise is the first thing you're screening for. And most executives, when they come in, they have the expertise to offer to do whatever you're bringing them in to do.
Hmm.
I'd say a lot of them also come with an innovative mindset. Um, but discipline is really, really difficult. We talk a lot about how we lead teams, how we lead others. Self-leadership is way harder for
Hmm.
me than leading other people.
Yeah.
Um, it's a constant fight to do the things that I know I need to do versus doing the things that I like to do.
Yeah.
And those aren't always the same. I
Right.
like it when they're the same, but sometimes I got to sit down and I got to focus on things that I don't really enjoy.
Yeah.
And so the discipline of that is where we see common pitfalls of there's a we can use the whirlwind as an excuse to consistently do the things that we want to do versus the things that have to be done.
Hmm. Okay. I'd love to, within those virtues, the expertise, innovation, and discipline, I'd love to talk about innovation. Um, and again, would love to hit on maybe one um, specific innovation that y'all have developed procedurally for ho- to solve these business problems that you're uh, running into with with this exec team. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Good question. So thinking of innovation again, it's tied to the principle of pursuing excellence. And so think of innovation as um, a virtue that says we always want to be better, and we're going to be looking at different ways to be better, because what got us here might not be what's going to get us there. We've probably all heard stories of even leaders who can get an organization to a certain spot, and then they end up exiting because they're not the leader that can take us to where we need to go next. And so innovation is really, in my mind, the virtue that says, how do I consistently look at new ways of doing things? That doesn't mean every 90 days I'm looking at, we got to change what we've done,
Right.
right? Because that
Right.
can be just as reckless. But what are the things that we've been doing that with a tweak or an innovation or just a little bit of an edit, can it be done better? A lot of times when we think of innovation or creativity, we think like we need big dreamers or thinkers. Innovation is really taking something that's already there and saying, what's the next twist on it to make sure we're staying ahead of the curve? And so part of what we do there is in our 90-day meetings, one of the things that we're doing is we're going back, we revisit our purpose tool, which is outlining why we exist, the principles we're running the company by, and the promises that we make to employees, customers, stakeholders, and vendors. Okay, so we look at our purpose tool, and we also look at our strategy tool, which is, there's a lot more in that one, but it's really defining where we want to go. And then that leads us to operationally our red, yellow, green. Okay. And if we are consistently saying, okay, yes, this is still where we want to go, then that look of the red, yellow, green assessments of all of our sub factors is what helps us say what needs to be innovated on
Mm,
next.
mm.
Because again, you may have something that's green today that if you're looking at, we call those meetings real-time navigation. Okay, so if it's green today, part of what you're doing as a group is saying, is that green going to be strong enough for tomorrow?
Mm, mm.
And that may not be over the next 90 days you need to fix it. That might be something that we say, okay, Canon, over the next year, we're really going to have to think about how we do this thing differently.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Part of strategy that we do is SWOT, it's PESTLE, and it's competitive analysis. And so if you look at all those things, it really begins to paint a picture for what are the external factors that are changing the landscape of our industry and what we need to do. And so, it's not easy. It's hard work. It's a lot of thinking work. And as operators, a lot of us just want to do stuff, right? Like boom, boom, boom. Here's the checklist. We got to get it done. And so it's really just a call to say, at what rhythm are we going to take a step back? We like to encourage people to do that every 90 days as a team, to say we're working on the business today, versus in the business. And we're going to
Yep.
be thinking about how we need to innovate. And then annually, there's a big push to say, okay, what are our next annual objectives that lead to our 90-day key results, et cetera. But through that real-time navigation meeting rhythm, you have some built-in time to make sure you're evaluating on, just because we're here today, how can that be better?
I really love how for those objectives and results that are marked green collectively, you're not just done with that thing, because like you still take that into account. Is like, okay, well, can this be a differentiator in our organization? Like, yeah, we're good at this. Let's not just move on to the next thing and say that, oh, that's perfect. No, like we don't have to ever think about that again. Like it's still in the back of their mind about like, is this important enough to continue to tweak, to continue for continuous improvement, rather than just moving on to the next red or yellow objective. That's important, I'm sure, but like still, like just not wiping our hands clean of all of the work that we put into that now green result.
That's right. Yeah. So probably the best example I have of this is it's an engineering organization that they do a lot of CAD work, and unfortunately, the CAD system that they were using is not always the exact same CAD system that their clients were using, right? And so they'd get a bid saying we need this design. They'd put it together. they'd send it to the engineering firm. Engineers, they then have to transfer everything into their CAD software,
Uh-huh.
try to match it, and this becomes like a months long process,
Yeah.
right? And it's industry normal, it's standard.
Yeah.
And what they decided to do is they just said, hey, if we're pursuing excellence and we want to get better and better, we also, again, go back to strategically, we serve people and we want to serve them really well. What would be a win-win for us all to work better together in
Huh.
this area? So what if we taught them, meaning our clients, how to use our CAD software? We'll just give it to them. They don't have to pay for it. We just give it to them. We teach them how to use it. And that way we're all speaking the exact same language. So that's what they started to do. And so what became a months-long process just to get a prototype, it became about a week-long process to
Nice.
get a prototype,
It's
right?
huge.
It's huge. And now what happens is you got clients who are absolutely in love because their speed to prototype and creation is way faster.
Uh-huh.
Now what do you get to do as the engineering firm? Well, you're the only one who's doing this. And so pricing becomes a much more open conversation
Sure.
about what will the market bear for this process and this speed to performance. The innovation is clear, their expertise is on display, right? And their disciplined approach is right there. And so when you look at just the principle of how do we pursue excellence, how do we serve people, it really begins to drive the daily actions and the ideas to say, what we have isn't broken. I mean, everyone's doing it the way we're doing it today, but how do we innovate? And that's the idea that came about. And now they're rocking and rolling, and
That's awesome.
the results continue to go up.
Yeah, I love that example. I love that example. Great. Well, I just wrapping up here. Any like what's the next, like what does the future look like for y'all and the direction, and whether 90 days, year, 10 years, like what direction, like what's the goal for y'all?
Yeah, our vision is we want to see more and more Christian organizations thinking long-term flourishing.
Uh,
So again, let's think 100 years. Let's think about what that next succession play will look like, and what are the disciplines, the operations, purpose, strategy, ops, execution that need to be in place today to improve our ability to transfer the next generation to the next generation of leaders within that same framework that can predictably produce economic, social, and spiritual impact at a compounding level. And so that's what we're on a mission to do. And so we're excited about that, and we're excited to see some of the wins as we work with other organizations, and really the mindset shift of how do we think long term to really produce flourishing businesses that honor God.
I love it. I love it. Mark, really appreciate you being here and chatting with me about operations and everything. And yeah, for the listeners, this is OpsOwners. We talk all about operations. We bring on director of ops, COOs, also visionaries to hear how they're specifically building better businesses. And so thank you all for joining me. And Mark, again, thank you for being here.
Awesome. Thanks, Cannon.